Welcome to the A Minute to Midnight Show, folks. I'm very glad to be on with you today and bringing a guy that I thoroughly enjoy interviewing, have had on the show quite a few times and always look forward to having again, and that's Stan Deyo. So it's awesome to be talking to you again today, Stan.
Hey Tony, how you going down there in NZ?
Well, I'm going pretty well actually, and how about you?
Oh, very good. Been spending a bit of time yesterday out in the lawn chair watching the lightning strikes overhead. Of course, we do get lightning storms here in the Rocky Mountains at this altitude, and I'm only about 45-minute drive from where Nikola Tesla used to do his experiments with lightning at the facility he built outside Colorado Springs, which is now part of the main city. It's grown a bit since his time, but yeah, it was interesting. I counted, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 until I could see how many seconds had passed from when I see a flash to when I see the lightning strike. And you divide by, I think it's, let's see, in miles, it's about by 4 to see how many miles, or 5 to see how many miles away it is. And I sat there and waited till the thunder reached, and then as it got closer and closer, I decided whether to stay sitting there comfortably or to run for cover. So anyway, I hear you guys have been having a few earthquakes, and Ruapehu and White Island are kind of on a status 1. I always watch over New Zealand for that Taupo eruption I'm expecting. So.
Well, yeah, that's a scary thing. We'll get into that in a second. But yeah, just back to the lightning and that, because I had just before coming on with you, I had some messages from Brooke Ardwin in Louisiana, and she sent me some recordings she'd just done of the thunder there, just instant clap. By gosh, it's scary, really. And I've been at her place in Louisiana storms before, and I tell you, New Zealand thunderstorms pale into insignificance compared to what they get there. So I know they had some pretty bad ones, and I think in Auckland the other day, and we certainly over the weekend had what we would call a pretty decent thunderstorm here, but nothing compared with a Louisiana thunderstorm.
Recordings of the things just don't do justice to being there when it just shakes your whole body, just boom.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's no warning, and boy, I tell you what, it's mighty, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually did some recordings when I was in Louisiana at Brooks of the audio recordings. Got some pretty good ones. I haven't put them out at this point, but yeah, they don't do it justice. But if you play them on some speakers with a decent amount of sub frequencies, that you can kind of almost duplicate the effect. But the thing is, the weather is just insane, and that's kind of these sort of things I was going to ask you today. So well, let's come back to the weather, and I just talking about the earthquakes and the Taupo thing, because I know a week or two back, I think maybe a couple of weeks ago, there were some minor earthquakes under Taupo, but there were a lot of them. And so I always straight away think back to you and that. Maybe you want to quickly tell people what your connection to Taupo is in case they haven't heard before.
Well, years ago, gosh, I guess back in about 1996 or 7, I lived in Perth, Western Australia, and I'd never been to New Zealand, didn't have a clue about what was in New Zealand, and I had a series of dream visions, 2, maybe 3, which took me to the edge of Lake Taupo. I didn't know it was Lake Taupo. It was just a lake in the dream vision. And it was so real that, I felt I was there in this place. And I saw myself coming along a road around this lake. And there was this Western style, Spanish style motel there on the edge of the lake. And it turned out to be Miguel's or something like that, as I found out later. But I'd never been there. And I saw steam coming up from the sand behind the motel on the edge of the lake, the shore there. So in my dream vision, I walked in and was talking to the girls at reception. And one of them was wearing like a hot glove mitt, you open the oven with. And I said, "What are you wearing that for?" She said, "Oh, our floor safe gets hot." And I said, "Oh, okay." And so then I said, well, thank you. I'll walk down the hall to the right here. And I walked down about 2, maybe 3 doors. I forget now exactly, but turned left into one of the doors, and it was opening out into like a bar or restaurant facing the lake with, nice glass windows so you could see it all. But the staff and the customers were all sitting up on top of the bar with their feet raised up, out of the water, because hot water had come in that high into the restaurant. And I thought, wow, this is a fun place to have lunch. Wow. Anyway, I woke up, and then I had another dream vision of I was looking at like a map of the area around Lake Taupo and Lake Taupo, and in the center where the lake was, an odd shaped outline appeared, and it was like a doorway actually, and I saw coming from my right down into that doorway like a tram coming down with people in it, and they were turned facing me, and they were all just kind of blank stares as they rode this tram down into the lake before a huge eruption was going to occur. And I had been in customs. That was probably the other dream vision about it. I'd been into customs there in New Zealand, coming in, and I had a little Casio red stopwatch counter, kind of computer type thing with me, which I did own at the time. And it was showing me that the time was very short. And I noticed people coming through customs there into New Zealand with me. There were people that had military backpacks and just normal tourists and all kinds of people, just like they were traveling over there to see, New Zealand, have a good time. The upshot of it all was that Lake Taupo was going to explode. I didn't know at the time, as I say, that it was Lake Taupo or Lake anything. I didn't even know where I was looking at, what country or anything. So I told Holly about it. We wrote it down, and a few weeks passed, and we had a knock at the door there in Perth. And this woman comes in and wants to buy one of Holly's books. And so we fixed her up, and we're talking to her. And she was a traveler. And I said, have you ever heard of a place that has like a big lake that's has a volcano under it or something and might erupt somewhere? And she's, I don't know. She says, I've been over to New Zealand, to the North Island. There they have a Lake Taupo, they call it, which is a volcanic region. You might check that out. And so I thanked her, and she left, and I started looking up on the internet immediately, Lake Taupo. And I thought, wow, this could be what I was seeing in my dream. Well, a few more weeks went by, and I got invited to come over and do a lecture there at Auckland at the university. And so Holly and I flew over and did the lecture, and we had some time up our sleeve, go back to Australia. So I said, let's hire a car and let's go on down to this Lake Taupo and see if it's what I saw in the dream vision. So we did. And just before we reached the city of Taupo there, couldn't see it yet, Holly says to me, wait, stop the car. She says, now tell me again everything you saw, the restaurant, Manuel's or whatever, and all the details of what you saw about this and the volcano. And after I told her, she says, okay, now you can drive and let's go see this lake. So we drove down there, and we had just probably gone, I don't know, 3 or 4 miles into the road that goes around Lake Taupo. And right there on my right, just like I saw in the dream vision, down below our road height, was Manuel's, motel. And so I said, well, we've got to go down and see this place. So we drove down, around, turned around, and came back in the parking lot. And I said, this looks just like the place. And we walked over, and sure enough, over on the left, kind of heading downhill toward the lake, was the reception area. So I went to the receptionist, and I said, hey, do you guys have a floor safe back in the office there? Yeah, we do. Why? I said, well, does it get hot? She said, oh, does it? What? Yeah, quite frequently we have to use mitts to open it up. It's so hot. And she said, even our guests, we have them down the end of the hotel here, the motel. There's a couple of them occasionally that will complain about turning the heat down. And it's because the heat, it's not from us, it's from the floor, from the ground, from the volcano. And, my ears really pricked up. And I said, is there a bar or grill here? And she says, oh, yeah. Just turn to your right there, go down that hallway, a couple doors, and there it is. Open the door to it, and it was the same place I saw.
Wow.
And I even saw through the glass in the dream vision, and when I stood there, little yachts, little boats that were parked off the coast just a little bit further around the edge of the motel. So all the things came together, and I realized I had seen a dream vision of this lake, this caldera now, I find out, was going to explode and erupt and destroy most of the North Island. So I talked about it. We were staying at a motel there ourselves, not that one, and I got to do a show with Art Bell from New Zealand that night. And I talked to Art about where we were, and we were looking at earthquakes and things like that, and this volcano and the dream I had, and what a serious thing it might be. And then we finished the interview, and I said to Holly, we were walking down there early this evening on the beach there next to Manuel's, and steam was coming up around our feet. And I looked across the road at one of the private residences, and their green lawn, steam was coming up through the grass. And I said, maybe we ought to spend the night in Auckland. Let's head on back up there. Now, it was already after closing time for the motel where we were, so I paid the amount that we owed for it on the table there and left a note and thanked them for it. And I pinned a note to the office door so they'd know that we didn't, take off without paying. And we went up to Auckland, and we stayed there for another day, and nothing happened. And I said, "Oh, this is rubbish." And so let's go back down there and have a
I'm not quite sure, Stan, what happened there. Just every now and then you've got drop out. So
really,
yeah, just a couple of words at a time. So I missed a couple of words there.
Right. Okay. Well, let me know if it happens again. So anyway, I drove us back down there, and we stopped at the same motel and booked in again. And the manager was so glad to see us. She said, "Oh, wow, we're glad to see you, because when you left in such a hurry, we knew you were here looking at earthquakes and volcanoes. And we thought you saw something that was so bad you left town. And, of course, us and all of our friends were really worried we were about to be blown away." So anyway, before we left, we got a phone call from the New Zealand Department of Tourism, and said, "Would you please never come back to New Zealand? You're bad for business." Anyway, well, the volcano didn't occur, but we did visit with your geological nuclear survey unit, and found out. We told them why we're there, and said it was pretty crazy, but we thought we'd tell them anyway. And they said, we've been wanting more equipment. We need a lot of equipment to monitor Taupo and some of the tributary rivers, for a possible eruption. But we can't afford things because we don't have a budget. And they bemoaned the fact that Government House was supposed to be moved 100 feet one way or the other. It was cost more than, a gazillion times their budget, for the GNS. And I said, well, I'm put the word out. And so I did mention that it was an odd thing that the government could afford to move Government House 100 feet, but they couldn't afford to save the island by funding the GNS. Well, blow me down. A few months later, they got their budget. It must have hit the press and shamed the New Zealand government. And they got enough money to rent or hire the German yellow submarine that's used for exploring underwater volcanic things. And they found a number of hot water vents down there that were streaming stuff up in the bottom of the lake. And then they put in alarms, river level alarms and temperature alarms all over around the area to help them monitor and possibly give warning to the people to duck and cover when it's going to come. They were very thankful for the budget, and I was glad to have helped, because they do need that. I watch you every week. I check on New Zealand and the earthquakes and the depths and the magnitudes and patterns forming and the volcanoes. And I watch particularly Ruapeo and White Island, and then north of White Island, the Kermadec. Major flurries of earthquakes. Now, just recently, you had a series of them in Lake Taupo, didn't you?
Yes, yeah, that was when I was thinking of you, because there was also, at the same time, or a day after that, you sent something about the Chinese dam, which maybe you want to explain that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a friend down there, Holly and I do, that she's a European, lives down there in North Island, and she knew a Maori kahuna woman there, and told her about what I said about the volcano. And the woman said to my friend, she says, "Tell him that we know it's coming, and that there will be a precursor to that to let you know what's going to happen. And it will be this," she said. "It will be a dam collapse up in China, and it will be found in the papers that there was some greedy people using substandard building materials like wood and stuff, and this caused the collapse of the dam. They had pocketed the rest of the money themselves, and it caused this, and there will be a scandal over that. at that time know that the eruption of Lake Taupo is coming soon. Now, so we've been watching that for a while. I thought it might have been the great dam that they built there, but that's pretty much concrete. I've checked that, and there are tributary dams where they're damming off more and more things to let the river or the lake build up. But it hasn't happened to the point where there's a scandal yet that some dam collapse caused the scandal. So that's what we're watching. If the Maori woman is correct, that will be our precursor for the people of North Island. Some other people did have dream visions about it. Some Christian people there in North Island told about seeing boulders the size of half a house being thrown up in the air toward, the northern parts of the North Island from that eruption. The Maoris did predict, to the Europeans, and oh gosh, when was it?
You're not talking about the Tarawera eruption?
Yes.
1883, I think it was.
Yeah, they saw the ghost canoe come past them there in the lake.
Yeah,
and then of course it did happen. So I tend to seem to have a connection to the earth, and whether it be a Christian connection or not, I'm just saying that they have that sense to know. And if the Maori start telling you down there is getting close, you better pay attention.
Of course, I certainly don't want a Taupo eruption to happen, but if it did, that'd be curtains for a lot of us. It's a massive super volcano. You've got a couple of them in America too that are maybe showing some signs, or at least one of them, I think, that is maybe something strange going on in California. Is that correct?
California has about 7 potential volcanic eruptors. When was about a month or less ago? Remember that surge of earthquakes there in the southeastern part? There was nearly 12,500, maybe 13,000 earthquakes in that spot, and some, of course, were minor aftershocks. But I started looking into that, and I found that the source of those earthquakes was right on top of one of the thermoelectric power zones that California plans to mine the thermal energy by drilling wells down in there and shooting water down into it to turn it to steam to come back up another pipe, their generators, and make electricity for California. So that's telling you that the magma is close to the surface there. Well, I looked at a cross-sectional map, one of the geoengineering maps of the area, and I found that there definitely is a large magma pool formed underneath where those earthquakes were in a long line about 52 miles long. And then I looked to the left of or west of that, into the San Joaquin Valley, and just slightly west of that, where the San Andreas Fault occurs, and a number of smaller parallel faults. And you can see in the cross-sectional cut through there that these two areas represent spreads or fractures, opening fractures in the Earth's crust. And the fact that we're seeing the huge number of earthquakes under that new zone is telling me that both of these long cracks are starting to spread and open up. We're getting closer to the moment, or not the moment, but the time when there will be a number of subsidences in California, turning California into a state of islands more than just a single state, and a lot of it will be detached from the mainland. When you see the cracks opening like that, the magma can ooze on up and make volcanoes too. If it's not oozing, it might be volcanic eruption. And if it hits the water, if the water hits it, it will be a steam phreatic type explosion. It'd be one of the worst types of volcanoes you can have. And there are 7 volcanoes that could be affected by this stretching, the fracturing of the surface there over California. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned that this will also trigger the Juan de Fuca plate up near Oregon in the sea, and other volcanoes along the Cascadia subduction zone there. Definitely an area to watch. I think we're going to see here, I can't say tomorrow, but let's say in the near future, within a couple of years, some very dramatic changes of events there in California and Oregon and Washington. Tsunamis off the coast, huge eruptions of merely 7 volcanoes at once. Dream vision of that too. I don't know why the good Lord blessed me with dream visions of volcanoes, but anyway, that's the story. So we've got that area. We've got the Yellowstone supervolcano area, which is showing activity in areas that hadn't been hot in a long time, geysers that are erupting that didn't erupt for 100 years or so. That tells us that the changes are inland that far. And it still takes me to the conclusion, in my mind, that the crust of the Earth is being stretched apart by the Earth increasing in diameter just slightly and pulling things apart. That's why we've had over the last 10 years so many sinkholes, as the pressure on the sinkhole area was reduced by the Earth expanding and stretching. It allowed things to collapse. It would have collapsed earlier, but the compression of the crust around it kept it from falling in, and it just adds to that theory, or hypothesis, I guess is the thing to say properly. But I do think we are in a state of geological change. I can discuss that in a minute, which is indicating that we're heading into a time of great trouble for the United States and the world.
So Brooke sent me a photo, which I can't verify. She'd got it off the internet somewhere, or it was a dual photo of a piece of a road supposedly taken at the same time of year, exact same day or something, a year apart, and the sunrise, or maybe it was a sun setting, I can't remember, one or the other, the sun was in a different place compared to the road than what it was a year ago. Now I can't verify it, Have you got any thoughts on that? Is the Earth tilting? Is the pole shifting? Or is this, what's going on?
I haven't seen direct proof of the tilt. I suspect it will happen. Whenever somebody tells me the moon's in the wrong place for this time of day, or the sun's in the wrong place for this time of year and day, I go to my Stellarium app and I plug in what the formula of movements of all the stars and planets shows me. And if it shows it to be in a different place for that same time of day, then I pay attention. As yet, I haven't seen anything that confirmed any of these suspicions. And I've had a number of emails over the last 2 or 3 years about people saying that. Having said that, however, I know that the magnetic North Pole is rapidly, like 35 miles per year, moving toward Siberia in Russia. Well, with it moving this fast toward Siberia, the North Pole and the magnetic field of the Earth is obviously, on the North Pole side, moving and causing changes in our weather, because it connects magnetically and electrically to major storms overhead in the atmosphere. So we're watching that closely, because even though it is moving that fast at the North Pole, at the South Pole, it's not drifting that fast at all. It's like a top where the bottom of you've spun a top on the floor, and the bottom of it's the South Pole, anchored on the floor. The top is wobbling, but the bottom isn't doing so much. So this is creating stresses on the surface of the Earth as well, and I think changing the climate. With the magnetic field shifting, it changes the weather patterns. This year, not only us here in Colorado, but other people in other states have mentioned changes in their plant growth and in their crop production. Here, where we have an orchard and vegetable gardens that we grow our food in, we have noticed this year that tomatoes came out over a month late and a lot smaller than normal. Watermelon and cantaloupe just didn't even pollinate at all. Even though we tried to help the bees with a little vibrating toothbrush, it didn't pollinate. We got our first pollinated watermelon 2 days ago, and this is way late. Yeah. The season is ending now. For peach trees and plum and cherry, they all had much smaller fruit than normal. So I started researching and finding out that the growth patterns and the bee pollination do depend a lot on a particular frequency of ultraviolet. And I noticed that the sun is very unstable in the high ultraviolet frequencies, UV, B, C, and beyond that. And this must be causing the changes in the plant vegetation and growth rate as well. So particular frequencies can affect how crops grow. Even if you fertilize them and water them and love them to death, with that ultraviolet coming from the sun in that range, it will stunt the growth. And we're seeing that. So there's just a lot of change happening all around us.
And I saw something this morning about, I think, lightning strikes up the North Pole, somewhere up that way, further north, and they'd recorded them before. and stuff like that going on, which all seems unusual. Is that tied in with all of that?
Yeah, they say that the North Pole region is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet. It's brought record-breaking heat. And of course, this heat produces thermal updrafts, which create the charge distribution that you see, or undistribution, if you wish, like a collection of charge. And it causes these lightning storms and flashes. You can see this week, anyway, you can see a picture of it and link to the article on my show images page off of standeyo.com, image 41, where I reported a story about it. They've seen like hundreds of strikes, lightning strikes near the North Pole. And as I told you, the North Pole is moving at that rate, at 35 miles per year, and it's done that for the last, maybe 10 years. It is off kilter, and it may signal a polar inversion. So that's just to the magnetic pole. Now, as far as the geophysical pole, if that starts to follow the magnetic core drift, we may see what people are saying, that the sun doesn't rise in the right place and so forth and so forth. So we do want to keep an eye on that and reference it to what it's supposed to be.
Okay, so you mentioned record-breaking heat, because I know in the last, say, year or so, there's been a lot of record high temperatures, but there's also been some records set in terms of the amounts of snow and low temperatures in places as well, which would seem it's certainly unusual that this is all happening. In your opinion, are we heading towards a grand solar minimum, or are we having man-made climate change, or are we having something else going on? What do you think is going on?
Well, we are heading into the solar minimum for solar cycle 24. That's or between solar cycle 24 and 25, if you wish. In 2020, we'll hit the statistical point where we're at the low sunspot activity for the sun. And I don't know whether they actually attribute that to solar cycle 24 or 25, but anyway, next year we're going to see the minimum. But there are things happening on the sun which are uncharacteristic. And you mentioned about some places having extreme cold and snow and that kind of stuff, while others are having drought. This occurs when the thermal machine, the heat machine of the planet, is disturbed and warming more than it should. And this creates convections in the world's atmosphere. And if our magnetic field is altering, which it is, and it's weakening, believe it or not, this can cause the climate to shift. And even though you have extreme highs and lows of hot and cold, what is happening is a redistribution of energy where it used to form or concentrate to other places. And this creates chaos in our growing climates and in the production of thunderstorms and snowstorms. So whether you want to call it global warming or global cooling or whatever, depending on where you're standing on planet Earth, you could be correct on either one of them. This vast disparity is partly due to the sun, because even though we're approaching the solar minimum now, in the last 3 months, I've seen coronal mass ejections, CMEs, come from the sun when it's supposed to be quiet. About 2 months ago, I saw one forming that had 7 bright spots on the solar photographs in a circle, and they were the bright spots looked like the points on a king's crown. And all of a sudden, they shot CMEs at us at the same time, the same shotgun effect. Instead of one, we were looking at all of them coming from that one ringed site. And I've seen evidence in these same animations of the sun where, invisible to normal light, something was happening where I would see in black areas near these bright spots, the sun's surface depth change and roll a bit. You couldn't see what was causing it because it was underneath the surface of the sun there. So things are happening on the sun that are affecting us. And the new ultraviolet frequencies that are coming at us, as I say, they're on the high end of the solar radiation, are causing unpredictable results because certain types of fish and marine life, like plankton and various other smaller things and krill, they absorb certain frequencies of ultraviolet, and it heats them up, which heats up the water around them, which changes the weather pattern. So there are so many things happening that it's just it's confusing trying to figure out where we're headed with this.
Well, I guess, we look at the Bible in like Matthew 24 and Luke 21, and, there'll be signs in the sky and in the earth and so on. And that seems to me what's happening. We're in the birth pangs of the end times, but obviously God would use natural occurring things to cause that to happen. So something has to, actually do it. Even though God says this is what's going to happen, he's obviously going to use things to do it. And of course, there are some people that say, well, we've got a Nibiru planet or Planet X or whatever coming into the solar system and that's causing it. And I've not seen any evidence of that. But what are your thoughts on that?
Those are the words of skeptics, of course. And, to me, if the Lord said it's going to happen, you'll see this, this, and that happen in the end days of this age. It doesn't matter whether Nibiru or the sun or man's activity or some other unknown entity causes the effect. It still was predicted by God, who is in control of time and events everywhere. So it doesn't matter what mechanism he uses, as far as I'm concerned. It's something he said would happen, and it did, or it is.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
I studied the Exodus and tried to trace a path, and did successfully do so, I think. And I saw along the way certain things that the skeptic would say, this wasn't God. This was a normal occurrence. Like when a large tornado, or maybe a hurricane, but a tornado, set right on top of Israel when they were being pursued by the Egyptians. And this wall of spinning air around them was spinning around in a thin layer, but in the middle of the tornado where Israel was, the people were, the air was hot and warm and showering down on them. So it didn't do anything to blow them around, but yet the outside of that funnel kept the Egyptians and the Israelis from touching each other because they couldn't get their swords through without them being ripped out of their hands. Now, that was an effect, and we found a place where that happens. It's a place of where the Greeks called typhoons or typhonos, and they even named a reed there that's a hollow reed in the area, the class of typhonos. So I found out, how they were separated from the Egyptians, and how when they moved across, the downward pressure forced the air down into the water and spread the water so that Israel traveled inside the eye of a tornado. A big one, mind you, it wasn't a small thing, over to the other side. And then I saw later, like when the Israelites were grumbling at Moses, look, we don't have enough water. You brought us out here to die in the desert, and water, we need water. And so he yells at a stone to bring forth water, and it doesn't happen. So, he ends up striking it twice with his rod to make water flow from this stone there in the desert. Well, we have since found one or possibly two places where this happened in Saudi Arabia, where they were really in the southwestern tip. And to my surprise, it is an occurrence that the Bedouins know about when they are looking for water desperately in the desert. They can go to sandstone outcroppings and where there's a ledge and take a staff or a hammer or whatever and break the edge off of these, and they will find water gushes out because it's been backed up and stored in a limestone layer, which has been blocked by the sands and mud forming a cap on it. So it is possible that where Moses was, there's two big stones there with a split between them, was a massive cap on a huge amount of water up in the higher parts of the desert in that area, in the mountains. And it held a reservoir that was big enough to give them water for many, many days, and livestock water and that kind of stuff. So you say, oh, well, it was probably just that happened to Moses. Well, somebody, the hand of God, put all that water there, put the knowledge in Moses' mind. This is where you hit it to release all this water when you need it. So the skeptic would say, yeah, but it's just one of those things, And you look at the manna that formed on the plants, early in the morning for people to eat. Well, there are plants there. I've read the reports and they found plants that do have this sweet honey-like dew material that forms on them, and you can eat it and get nourishment from it there in the desert. Well, again, they would say, well, that's just a natural desert thing. How did Moses know exactly where to go, when to go, what to eat? God put all this stuff in the program for our planet from before we were even born, before mankind even existed. It was there in a program for unwinding through God's will, through the ages. And so if he uses something he planted when he built the planet, so what? It is still a miracle. And this is what amazes me, that the skeptic's mind just won't, unusual these things are.
Yes, yeah. I agree. I do believe that God uses natural things, but in supernatural timing. So yes. Yeah. Now, what about just coming back to things like the weather and that? What are your thoughts on geoengineering? Do you think that that's going on? Is it having any effect, or is it insignificant? What are your thoughts?
Look, we've been trying to geoengineer the planet for increased food production, which is, and water production, things like this. And this happened, I read about it in the 50s when I was still a young kid even, and Dad and I talked about it. The Russians put coal dust over large areas of the Siberian snowfields to try to thaw them out. And of course, this also changed weather patterns, by heat upwelling there, thermals, which affected weather onto Alaska and Canada and the northwestern United States. So that is a form of geoengineering. And the effects of it, of course, tell you that man can look at making changes to the local environment right now without knowledge of what's going to happen to the rest of the environment around the world as a result of this, because we don't have the formula for how the planet works. And I tell you this because I know that trying to predict the weather, the computers that try to predict the weather alone need at least 98 variables to try to estimate a week ahead of time what the weather's going to be. So the environmental changes, when you start putting black substances on the snow to change the melt rate and the thermals over that to cause weather to form that didn't used to form there, or when you look at the salinity of various things, or when you dam off a river, a large river or a series of rivers, like in China, the Great Dam over there. When you do that, you don't think about the weight that's going to be concentrated on that part of the country. Will it affect underground fault lines, and will it affect the spin rate or the wobble in the earth over a period of time? Because we do not have the formula for the planet. And so, although we try to do good things and sometimes bad things with manipulating the weather, we have no real idea what's going to happen. And if two or more countries start modifying the weather in a big way with microwave or with HAARP type broadcast and this kind of stuff, the two or more countries are going to be at odds with each other about what changes they're making, unless we're a world government, which we're not yet. And so these two or three or more countries are affecting weather changes in their areas, which affect the changes in other areas, which might affect the changes the other areas are making, and it compounds into a nightmare of events. So I know we need it in some places, but it's dangerous.
That's a really interesting point that you just made, because we don't have a world government yet. Now, that could be another reason, for them to say with all these things, why we need a world government. There's another thing, they have to coordinate all this stuff. It's another excuse, I guess, to do it.
I'm in favor of a world government, okay? But not run by mankind. It has to be run by the guy that has the formula, the model for how the planet should work, because he was the creator of the planet. If we have Jesus here running a world government, I'm happy with that. But men who are greedy and self-interest come into play with them, this cannot be, a stable world government if we have mankind running it. But there's just no way, because we are ignorant and we're greedy. So, it's when I say I'm in favor of it, but conditionally. And that's why.
Yeah, and that's not going to happen until after, when Jesus returns, we'll get that, but not until, we know what the Bible tells us is going to happen in the meantime with the attempts at world government and the man of sin and everything. So that's going to happen. Well, I was just thinking before I forget now, we had, you were talking about CMEs. Of course, back in the I can't remember, was it 1852? Something like that. The Carrington event.
1859, I think it was.
59. Yeah. Oh, well, I was close.
Well, I might be wrong myself, but it was 1850 something. Anyway,
Yep. Okay. So if an event like that occurred today, it would do massive damage to to, the infrastructure, electronics, and because back in those days there wasn't much running on electricity, at all. It was a pretty new thing, and yet it was so well recorded then. So the potential for something to happen like that now must be, it's got to be there as much as it was back then, and no one's really prepared for it, are they?
No, and if you look at the reports of that Carrington event, which was in 1859, I just checked it.
Okay.
The major electrical use at that time was telegraph along the railway lines, and the effect was so prolonged and so charged with high voltage that it actually burned the hands of several of the telegraph operators because the charge went along the line up into the telegraph key. It started fires along the telegraph lines, along the railway lines as well. So that was just, a telegraph line. I don't even know if Alexander Bell had much of his telephone in operation at that time. So it wasn't really a major event to household or corporate electrically driven devices. Now, as you say, we are so dependent on digital electronics, on just electrical flows in the grids all over the earth, that should the power be brought down by these electromagnetic pulses, the EMP from the sun, it will put us back into, if we're lucky, the horse and buggy age. Not the Stone Age, but the horse and buggy age. And if it hits only part of the planet, then the major countries, the world powers on the other side of the planet, would then be in a position to control the planet because they have the working electricity. So, it would be totally disastrous for us to lose power in our main transformers in this country, because it takes at least 2 years and a lot of money to build one of the transformers that handles the grid power transfers in our country. And China is the one that builds it for us. Mm-hmm. And if we're at war with China, too bad.
Yeah.
It's just it's a nightmare. I can't really go into detail, but my partner in our EMP Shield company is in Washington, has been there for several days, working with the Department of Homeland Security in protecting infrastructure from such events. So the government is not oblivious to this, and what it does do and is doing is not being made public to the degree it is, simply for caution with our enemies looking down our throat.
You do have some products, personal products too, don't you, that people can?
Oh yeah. We sell them to householders who want to protect, say, like their solar array, their backup power. We have a device that you wire into that, and it protects it against the EMP strike, so that after it's over, they can still use the solar power or the wind power or the things in their house, because we have a unit for the house that it protects it from lightning strikes, out just nearby, which cause surges on the line. It protects everything in our house by shunting all the voltage in that spike into the ground, away from your electronic or electrical devices in your home or your car. We have one for the car. We have one for ham radio operators, so that we can have communication reestablished in the country with that and in the world. We have over 36 devices now that are special applications for the United States, and when the government says that we will sell it overseas. We have to deal with the Defense Department, so we have to get clearance for each country and each type of device that we would sell offshore, understandably. But certainly the United States, we're doing a lot to protect the individuals.
Yeah, well, that sounds good. Now, I'm thinking there's all kinds of things. It looks to me like the US economy and the world economy is at the beginning of the death spiral at the moment. So that's going to affect people, if the economy really crashes. And then we've got all these weather events, and we've got, earthquakes and volcanoes you mentioned. What do you think people should do? Because there seems to be so many potential hazards increasing. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it gets down to the individual's requirement for food, water, shelter, and peace and safety, in essence, as well. What we're seeing now in the government bond market here in the United States is a clear and very dependable indicator that we're about to enter a severe recession before the end of the year.
Yep.
And When you hit the pocketbook, you hit the person's ability to have food, shelter, protection, peace, and safety. And people get very concerned about that. To prepare for that, Holly started when she was probably 14. She and her mother used to prepare for, storm celars for tornadoes there in Kansas, Missouri area. And so she started growing up with this need to prepare and what you need to do to prepare. As she grew older, went through university and learned how to be, a writer and editor and all that kind of stuff, an English major, she developed the ability to convey this in a conversational manner. When we got together, got married, she told me about this, and she started writing a book. And since I was in the publishing business, I knew how to put it together and publish it. So she put together her personal experiences, then researched, and then got letters from people in a club that she set up on the internet to tell her about their methods of preparing for various disasters, how they weathered, what they did and didn't do, that kind of stuff. She compiled that into the Dare to Prepare book, which is now 632 pages long and weighs about 3.5 pounds. It's a complete Bible of preparation as far as the physical preparation you need to make on Earth to do the best you can to prepare for certain types of crises. Now, that's physical preparation. She would tell you there in the book and elsewhere that spiritual preparation is the most important, because we are all going to die someday, except maybe those that are translated in the rapture are still alive and get converted into their everlasting bodies then. But since we're all basically going to die, we're going to meet our Creator, and it's important that we understand that and make peace with our Creator and, do His bidding while we're here, to guarantee your everlasting life rather than your temporary life here on Earth in this solid body. So that's the main preparation. The secondarily is, if you have resources to prepare to save your family or protect your family and your business or your neighbors and friends around the neighborhood, then okay, do that. And here's how you do it. She explains that in the book. Beyond that, you can't prepare for everything. There's just no way.
Yeah.
So you do the best you can to prepare for the types of emergencies you might endure where you are. Certainly a financial one is a major one. Secondarily is weather in your area, whether it be tornadoes, tsunamis, lightning storms, whatever. And thirdly is self-defense of you and your home, because people will be pretty unruly. Anarchy will emerge when we have like a global or a national war, nuclear war and EMP strikes from the sun or from warring countries, that kind of stuff. Religious differences, racial differences. These areas of concern you have to handle. Read her book and read online about the various things you need to do for each kind of emergency, and then make up your own mind what you can afford and what you can deal with. Beyond that, I don't know what else to tell people.
I guess, yeah, because you're saying, and pretty much what I'm seeing as well, that the economy's about ready to head into a severe recession. So people have that bit of an opportunity now. It's like, do the preparation now, because time's running out in a way to do it, particularly if the economy starts to go and, you don't have the money to do it. So now's probably the time to be doing it. And yeah, getting into the Bible, studying God's Word and into prayer, I guess, is the number one thing, because then you can find out exactly what God wants you to do on an individual level, which is what you said, and I totally agree with, because it'll be different for every person. Right. So that's great advice. So for the listeners that don't know, where can they find you online and read about and purchase, if necessary, the EMP stuff and Holly's book and all of these things? So you maybe want to tell them.
All right. Well, look, we have several websites. Our main news website that Holly updates every day, 6 days a week anyway, is called standeyo.com, STANDEYO.com. And the major preparation book that she's written is on that page. It's called Dare to Prepare, next to The Cosmic Conspiracy that I wrote, and to another book she has, which is gardening, raised bed gardening, which is an electronic book you can download from our shopping cart. Now, I also have what's called a Show Images page that you can get to off our main page. There's by the microphone, you click Show Images, and you can click on, say, the Hagman Report, which is where I appear once a week. And I have several stories on there that change from week to week and others that stay there all the time, which you can read and be advised of what's current on my mind about what's happening and what we need to be concerned with. Then we have a YouTube channel, which is Stan Deyo channel on YouTube, and there's a lot of videos and things on there that you could just download and look at for free. And then we have the Patreon site, Patreon, and that's patreon.com/ then all run together the word Stan Holly Deyo, StanHolly Deyo, Deyo. And you'll get to our Patreon page if you're a member there, which costs you $5 a month. You get our own club type discussions, feedbacks back and forth between us about various things that people are interested in that site. It's my personal kind of relationship with the listeners that go there, and it helps support our costs for productions of these various things that we put on there. And let's see, Patreon, YouTube, website. Okay, I think that's 4 major website things that we do. So people can go there, and we have our emails at the very end of the main page, and we'll feed back to you.
So you mentioned the Cosmic Conspiracy. Is that back in print again? Can people?
It is. Yeah, I was out of print for a while because the sales were kind of slowing down, and so I didn't have it. Then all of a sudden we got hit with a bunch of requests for it, and so we reprinted it, and it's available now. We ran out of Dare to Prepare books here a while back, and it's about time for me to reprint that again. We're getting orders in some cases by about 100 books at a time, so people are seeing the need to get ready. And on that note, Tony, you mentioned about get it now. Whatever you're going to buy for preparation, especially generators or solar or whatever. I suggest people get things that they're going to need, not save money for it, but get the things now, because the things themselves are going to be worth more than money when you need them. And you don't want to be in a queue trying to get a generator or fuel for it or solar or wind power. You don't want to be in a queue. You want it there in your home, stored away if necessary for when you need it. Even some foods are good like that. We've been trying some of our stored food, dehydrated meats and things, and some of the banana chips don't really ding my chime. They don't taste that nice, but the chunk meat, stuff like that you put into chilies or into enchiladas or things like that, those are good. I mean, I've tried those, and we're gradually starting to eat into those supplies just to see what it's like and what we do like and what we don't. You can do that now because you have the time.
Yeah. So
just people plan ahead. We're fast approaching a time of great distress.
Yeah, and I also think personally, people, if you can get some physical silver right now, is the time to do it, because gold and silver is going to skyrocket, and that will hold its value when everything else is crashing. So that's another thing I'd add to that. Well, Stan, we've covered a lot. But anyway, the point of the matter is we've got to put God first, and we can't trust in our material things. But, yeah, find out what God wants us as individuals to do in terms of preparing. But yeah, this has been another great discussion. Gosh, I can't believe how fast the time's gone, Stan.
It does swing by, doesn't it?
It sure does. Thank you, though, again for coming on the show. And yeah, we'll have to do it again before too much time passes.
All right, Tony. You take care now.
Cheers. Thank you.
God bless you.
Folks, don't forget to hit the like button on this if you enjoyed it, and don't forget also, if you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, to do so. A Minute to Midnight's YouTube channel, and we also are on iTunes, and of course our website, which is aminutetomidnight.com, where all of our shows and articles can be found, and all the music in the shows I've written, played and recorded. And if you want to download that music, you can do that on the website as well. And if you want to support us with a donation, you can do that on aminutetomidnight.com. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you in a few days' time with another show. God bless and have a great week. This is Tony saying goodbye till next time.